It's OPB Politics Now for Friday, July 25th. It didn't take long for all of Oregon's Democratic congressional delegation and the state's governor to say they were throwing their weight behind the vice president after the president's announcement that he would not seek re-election. Oregon is not a swing state, but the person at the top of the ticket can have an impact on down-the-ballot races. So will the Democratic nominee for president matter in Oregon? We'll discuss. Welcome to the podcast. I'm OPB politics reporter Lauren Dake.
I'm OPB politics reporter Bryce Dole.
Bryce, within 24 hours of President Biden dropping out of the race, we heard from Democratic politicians across the nation and across the state who immediately said they were excited to support Harris for president. Let's listen to a couple of them in their own words. Here's the governor, Tina Kotek.
She is smart, she is strong, she is the right person.
Another person we heard from was Congressman Earl Blumenauer. He was the only member of Oregon's delegation to call on Biden to step down in the early days, and he said that decision had nothing to do with the fact that he was not seeking re-election. He was also the last to endorse the vice president, but he did that in a conversation with Dave Miller on OPB's show Think Out Loud. Here's that quick exchange.
Dave, I'm happy to give you a scoop that for the first announcement publicly that I'm supporting the vice president in her quest for the presidency. You're welcome.
Another politician we both spoke with, Bryce, was Val Hoyle. She's a Democrat from Eugene who was and remains a big Biden fan. She was not one of the politicians who criticized the president after the disastrous debate, but she moved quickly to back Harris once that announcement was made. And she made the point that the messaging that Harris could provide could be particularly helpful in Oregon races.
That's right. Like a lot of Democrats this week, Val Hoyle started off by thanking President Joe Biden for his service to the country and saying that he had put the country first by abandoning his re-election bid. And then she went on to talking about how excited she was about the possibility of having the first woman president. And she quickly talked about how she sees Vice President Kamala Harris as being the right person to help Oregon deal with some of its most pressing issues, like the wildfires that are impacting a lot of the state today.
We need a president that is going to continue to invest in climate resilience, and that's Kamala Harris. I think people are energized.
Experts say this is the kind of energy that was really missing from the Biden campaign in recent weeks. And the recent support for Harris from members of Congress, it was a bit of a contrast from previous weeks when a lot of them wouldn't answer directly whether or not President Joe Biden should drop out of the race. A lot of them were issuing very lukewarm statements, not saying one way or the other how they felt about it. But Hoyle says that for now, there's obviously a lot of energy.
Harris also really became the administration's spokeswoman on reproductive rights. And that's certainly a message that will resonate strongly with Oregon Democratic voters. So the vice president is a de facto Democratic nominee. She seems to be in a pretty strong position. Last night, Oregon Democratic delegates voted unanimously to endorse her. Democrats seem hopeful, but you talked to some political scientists that said, that might not trickle down the ballot.
This was the biggest question on Monday, which was how would a Harris campaign impact Oregon's political races? And I called political strategists and analysts and professors, Democrats and Republicans, and each of them agreed that having Harris at the top of the ticket, it helps Democrats in one way or another. A lot of voter support had obviously been missing due to concerns around Biden's age and whether he was fit to serve another 4 years. But now, with this level of support, some experts really expect that the Democrats will be trying to focus the race back on former President Donald Trump's fitness for office, now that Biden is kind of out of the way. And with this new energy, they expect that candidates for Congress might have an easier time fundraising and building voter support.
I think it's also worth mentioning that Democrats in the state legislature are hopeful that Harris being in this race will make it easier for them to fundraise as well. I spoke to someone who is in charge of the political action committee for the Democrats in the House, and she said within 30 minutes of the news breaking about Biden, her phone was ringing with people who wanted to volunteer, who wanted to canvass in Central Oregon for Democratic candidates. And that's important, especially in the Senate, where the Central Oregon seat is one that Democrats have really been wanting to flip for a long time. It's currently held by Senator Tim Knopp. He is prohibited from seeking re-election because he led the legislative walkouts. And it's been held by Republicans for a long time, but Democrats actually have a slight voter edge there. So it seems like it will certainly be better for the Democratic candidate in that race if the race is more centered on Trump's actions opposed to Biden's cognitive abilities. So for some of those tighter Oregon legislative races, it seems like there is some momentum. But Bryce, you heard from some people who just feel like this momentum probably is not going to last.
Look, this was clearly a historic moment, and this level of excitement, it's to be expected. Having a president drop out this late is extremely unusual, and a lot of people are really excited about the prospect of having the first woman president. But a lot of experts that I spoke with noted that a lot of the polls have shown that Trump still has a lot of momentum and had been consistently leading President Biden, and that was obviously heightened by the assassination attempt just 2 weeks ago, but there's still more than 3 months to go. Much of the Democratic and Republican base, they were already decided. They were going to vote along party lines, and I talked to Rebecca Tweed, a Republican political strategist in Oregon, and she said that having Harris at the top of the ticket might affect a really small number of people, and that is swing voters, voters who were on the fence about the two-party candidates.
The bases aren't going to move at this point. We're talking about, that second layer that is deciding who they like better than the person they dislike. That's really what it will come down to.
And everyone who I talked to said that these swing voters are especially critical and could really make a big difference in Oregon's close congressional elections.
Okay, well, speaking of close congressional election districts, a really tight race where the top of the ticket matters is Oregon's 5th congressional district, which includes the Portland suburbs all the way to Bend. It's one of those rare Oregon districts that is a true swing district and could go either way. What have you heard about the changing dynamics in that race?
This is one of the more high-profile congressional races in the country, and whoever wins could ultimately decide which party controls the U.S. House of Representatives. And in 2022, it was decided, obviously, by a super thin margin of just 2%. And experts say that an influx of Democratic enthusiasm could really make a difference here. They anticipate that Democratic congressional candidate Representative Janelle Bynum will try to tie herself to the vice president more and more and kind of ride this momentum through to November. But the question that remains is whether that will be enough to overcome the momentum that the Republican Party has on their side right now.
Well, one thing we know for certain is this past month has been a lot. There was the disastrous debate and the attempted assassination, the entire Republican National Convention. It just seems safe to say a lot more is going to happen between now and November, and we're going to be here to cover it. Bryce, thanks for joining me. This week's episode of OPB Politics Now comes to you from the Gert Boyle studio. It was produced by Anna Griffin, and our audio engineer is Stephen Cray. Our music comes from Audio Network. We'll be back next week with more political news from across the Pacific Northwest. Until then, you can keep up with all of our reporting at opb.org, and you can become a member there. It's the single best way to support our work. Thank you for your support, and thank you for listening.